dive into this, but there is a guidebook, just especially around establishing targets for community. I believe this is a late 2024 version, but we are one of the earlier communities to use this work and to enter into this type of look at our housing stock. So I just refer to this for more information on the actual numbers. I'm not working for me.
Trying to move people over. So.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Go for it.
I hear that. Again. She lost the people that are panelists, so.
I think she got it.
Okay.
Try again.
Okay. So this, some of our key points, the A prime methodology that was adopted in the resolution remains unchanged. All jurisdictions have used A prime as the SCEO recommended and Board of County Commissioners. So the input instructions from Commerce were originally incorrect, and I have those print out in the next slides, so I can sort of show you how to look and see if you're looking at a population one or a housing one. But we made a correction to go to housing and share rather than.
Joel, yes, for clarification.
Just clarification. So it says they recommended, but was it demanded, or I mean, I don't remember. We were told, but if it's just a recommendation, we still have the opportunity to use population.
Well, the SCEO, no, we did have discussions further about
the feedback or the
and the steering committee. So yeah.
I don't remember.
Yes, but we still use the same methodology out of the choices.
But when it was presented to the county commissioners that had the population allocations in that, when it was passed with those population
in the attachment.
So that was what was
not
approved by the county commissioners. That was the document.
Well, no, let me correct that, Joe. The commissioner's resolution was to approve the A prime methodology.
Yes.
The table that was attached to it was the HAPT tool using the population allocations, which is what the tool was on the table at the time.
Yeah.
That was simply an appended document. The resolution adopting the methodology is what the board approved.
Yeah.
That was January 21st. January 29th, this group met, and that's when the HAPT housing allocation tool was brought forward.
But never voted on by the county commissioners, correct?
Correct.
So yeah, so maybe that's the clarification is we adopted a resolution that identified the population base. Where's the resolution that switched it to the housing? We have that.
The resolution adopted the HAPT methodology, which was, we have the choice of A or B, and then they developed A prime, which we're calling A prime, which they now call C. So just the methodology was all the reference in the resolution.
So it didn't talk about the population versus housing at all?
It did not discuss that.
And what changed that was challenging for all of us, and recognizing first off, House Bill 1220 was something brand new to begin with. The HAPT tool came to us even as we already started our planning programs. And then the HAPT input request from Commerce changed. We were using population to look at housing units. Commerce changed that methodology to say you should use housing units to look at that. That changed in between the discussion.
I thought you just did it again. You said should, and Joel commented on this too. Like, where is the mandate? If it's not a mandate, I feel like there has to be a.
We've been on this understanding it was population, and then it switched. I remember the conversation after that vote, because it was population, but at that time, we were all on population at that time when we voted on. So I don't know. We call it A prime. I know we said that's C, but then there's been references to C separate from that. So there was a process issue we have to address. I mean, there was a big process problem here. I know a lot of people dug into this, but there was a process problem.
I think we'd have to ask Commerce for their degree of requirement on that change. Okay. Because it was pretty clear to PTAC that we were directed to use, we as planners were directed to use housing allocations, not population allocations.
I know there's been conversations, private conversations with Commerce, and they said that wasn't the case. So I'm not saying they didn't tell you that, but they're talking both sides because there's been conversation that that was not required by law. Somebody was recommended, but I don't know if there was a law that was required that to use housing.
Well, and I want Cheryl to finish, but have you just asked county legal, I mean, just to give us some verification on this, because I think that was cleared up too.
We have not, because again, the resolution that the board adopted was just the methodology.
And
It was
the
not
methodology
specifically
for the
input.
A prime though,
Correct.
correct? So there were two actual distinct tables. The incorrect table was used.
Now, that makes this even more complicated. There are two tables attached. One superseded the other. There was one single number different between those two tables. Otherwise, they were identical. So it wasn't a totally different thing. Out of hundreds of allocations, there was a single number that was calculated incorrectly. But that was what was corrected at the time, because that's how we were using the methodology at the time, was based on population.
So
For a short period of time, then we realized the error, corrected it to the housing. And now to my next point is, we are all using the housing share, including Spokane County in the EIS. And that's
I'm
what.
struggling with
we
the
have-
error, though. I apologize. I'm just struggling with the error. It sounds like it was a recommendation, it was not voted on by this group nor the county commissioners to switch. I just don't understand how it's an error with.
Yes,
with
this
this
was
group.
right. And this
I mean, it's discussed. I'm not gonna lie, it was discussed. It's never voted on. It's a legal requirement. I understand. Then you're not gonna make that change. So the responsibility is here.
Right. And then later,
Amended this time.
So to your,
because
so
others
just,
don't.
I'm just trying to understand. It's
I
very
know, I'm
confusing.
just trying to.
Yeah.
Sorry, please,
Is the A prime the housing share methodology?
The A prime is a
Okay.
method for the distribution. The input should be housing share.
Okay.
There is also a fee method in the tool, and I might have to have Melissa Alapatuli explain that if you're interested. Understand the differences. I think that the county preferred A prime because it gave a allocation to the rural areas.
It took out the allocation to the rural areas,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, in the lower income bands. So that was preferable.
Councilmember Bliski.
We also agree with the A prime methodology because it took the housing out of the rural element, which I think everyone agrees is a weird decision to make, right? But Commerce's guidance and the email they sent to the entire group of jurisdictions says the percent shares inputted into the HAP allocation method are meant to be percent of net housing needs, not percentage of population growth. And then in the current version of the program, when you go on their website, there's a pop-up window that comes up. It says user input share, percent share of countywide housing growth values must be summed to 100%. So if you're following the directions of using a tool, that's how you use the HAPS tool. What I don't understand is, are we just talking about our process of adopting a methodology, or are we talking about how we use the HAP tools? That's how you're supposed to use the HAP tool. Doesn't have anything to do with a mandate. It has to do with how the tool was designed and how it's supposed to work. Like, why would we not use it the way it's designed to work? I don't think that's a very dispensable idea, but I also am not clear why we're arguing about this.
I guess what I've read is you have the choice to use population or housing. It doesn't say you have mandate, with a mandate from Commerce to use either one. Now, if I'm incorrect, please correct me.
So in the April 20th letter to the VOCC and this committee, Commerce Senior Planner actually said we recommend that the Board of County Commissioners take action to adopt the housing allocation table using method A prime with housing share. We took that as authoritative guidance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They designed the program. This is what inputs we're supposed to give the program. You guys like our soundtrack?
There's
There's
little
change going on.
question, there's little question among planners and certainly among, we can see it among you and others over these last year, that the change from population allocation as the input to a housing allocation as input has been confusing. to be sure. Because we started out with population and went on our merry way, and then it's like, no, you need to use this other mechanism to do that. That changed, as we were all saying, it changed those numbers in different ways. The city's allocation went up, counties went down, Fairway Heights went one way, Medical Lake went another way. The county rural allocation went up dramatically. We couldn't explain the algorithm that forced those changes that didn't seem proportional to the housing share until we got the kind of basic explanation saying you had to take out group quarters because you're not planning for housing for group quarters. So that's prisons, dormitories, hospitals. And it had to account for a homeless factor, which was also sort of not really well defined. What that seemed to do is it then put those allocations into the central city and took them away from the county. But we were never able to peel away the layers and find out, well, how does that algorithm work? How did that thing actually happen? And so, yeah, it's been confusing, to be sure.
But I think it's always the process, like we adopt our population projection. And then we break it down into housing allocation. That's the normal process. I think the only thing that's new here is that we're using a software tool that was given to us by the state.
That is absolutely true, council member. And, from not representing a county opinion, but from planning being supposed to be happening at the most local possible level, so that when your input is in here, you're making these allocations. We had the ability to lay out the population allocations individually for the county, and we did that through this and through this resolution. But this tool is a top-down tool. It's a very heavy-handed tool in the sense that everybody in the state now has to use this tool to make your allocations. And that took away the flexibility of the step that you just described, where we've made our population allocations. Now, how does each community adjust its housing allocation now that we have to do this income band? We were handed a tool, and we used it, but it's a brand new tool. It's been confusing. We changed the rules as we got started, which made it confusing for PTAC. It made it confusing for you. And we're here to try to reconcile that.
Yeah, I think the flexibility that we're given now is to take that out of the rural areas. And I think we're making that adjustment. I think we're all headed in the same direction. And things seem to be pretty fine if we just get
that very specific tool, or that specific agreement, if you will, from Commerce, fixes the over rural application. It means we can pull that out based on development patterns, on defensible trends. We're working on that now. That was a big issue with this. The other part is, are the allocations to the cities accurate? We don't know. That was my comment about a crystal ball. And so I don't know that there's any realistic way to say 2,000 here should go 2,000 here until we look at, in the case of the city, the preferred alternative, your final EIS, what's that going to suggest in terms of how this allocation can be supported? As the biggest player, the city of the valley and the county. As we look at our EIS and these pieces, that'll give us some sense of, can we actually accomplish what we think we're doing with HAPT?
Okay, let's let Tyrell
That's a good
finish.
segue for me.
No, you're good. And then we'll come back and discuss more.
Yeah, because maybe this isn't the third bullet point, but I wanted to say that any shortfalls in the, especially lower economic bands that cities may have in their housing numbers now, we have all done the work, and we are confident that we can make those changes to our zoning maps, to our development regulations, that we can make the accommodation necessary for all the income bands and the data that we have received from the HAP tool using the housing allocation. And City of Spokane, we are, as Scott mentioned, sort of in our preferred alternative land. So we're working on our comp plan, but some of the other cities are further along and are actually ready to adopt. So that's a heightened concern with making sure this is clarified. And we've talked already about the guidance. So right here it says housing growth. I think I saw some screenshots of some other earlier ones that said population growth. So make sure you're looking at one that says housing growth. I'm sorry that this is not very easy to read on the screen, but this is the HAP tool results that we are all using. This is what we refer to as A prime, but also commerce nomenclature could be described as method C. And again, it's using housing share for each community. So that's right here. So again, we have a letter in the record. Director Chesney has also put a letter in. We're recommending that a new resolution is adopted, which has the correct table attached. Reaffirms again the A prime method. And this will be the allocations that we are all already using, already invested a lot of time, energy, and public money in our environmental review. So that's our recommendation. We really also need this inconsistency corrected. It's causing a lot of confusion. Again, Spokane County as well as the cities are using these numbers. And you have a letter also on record from Washington Commerce affirming that they have been working with staff throughout this process. As we've all been working collaboratively, we've been working with the steering committee. We have briefed you on when we learned of the difference between population and housing. At the time, it was felt unnecessary to change the resolution because it did adopt the methodology, which we all felt correct. But hindsight is a great thing. We probably should have taken more action then. So that's all for me.
And that recommendation is essentially to the county commissioners, not for this group to have to do anything with.
I mentioned to Scott that maybe he could talk to that since it does get into the Board of County Commissioners, how they would process that. So.
You want to address that, Scott?
Sure. Yeah, if there is in fact consensus that we should formally ask the commissioners to adopt the table using housing allocations, then we would prepare such a resolution for their consideration. We did not do so to this point, as Tyrrell hinted, because the commissioners did adopt the methodology in January of 25. During that other time, there have been, noted with Commerce, lots of discussions, including here, about how did these numbers happen and should they be changed? Should they be doing that? BTAC is making the argument that we have, all of the communities, including the county, have used the current HAP as housing allocations for our own environmental work, for our own study work. Our initial thought was, since that's the tool from Commerce, it is wise for us to use that tool in our planning work. It keeps us closer to being in compliance, and then use the flexibility we have, notably to move things out of the rural allocations into a more urban allocation. That seems like a reasonable approach at this point, but we are prepared, if there's a consensus from this group, to take a resolution, a request before the board. We were not asking for a formal vote, but that, of course, is up to you.
Well, and there's no action items or anything on
No,
here, so I'm not sure if we really could.
Not today.
Well, maybe, Joel?
My concern, I guess, just go back to process. So we say we're using the HAP tool, but then we could just, because Commerce says we can change it, we didn't get the result we wanted out of HAP. So now we're just able to change it, but we don't have that ability any other way besides if Commerce says it's okay. I'm just struggling with that. Is that the right way to do it? I know everybody should have received a message from Jim and Frank. I think he's cracked the code on HAP. It's not that complicated, really, when you look at it. And I love Jim to talk today and explain that because he's an expert on this. But he said it's all letter explaining what happened. And we used, it goes back to the look back to 1990 is our look back. And that was before we even had growth management, those trends. And so that's why I pushed out more rural growth, because we were allowing rural growth back then. And so it's just that we have a method that we are pushing forward that's really giving us bad data. I mean, I hate to say it, it's just bad data we're using. So I guess I'm just at the point where I understand we're a long ways into this, but none of us really understood. I don't think even people really understood HAP. It's been acknowledged, hey, we didn't understand HAP, but we're going with it. And but we plugged in, it's a plug and play system. You put the data in, you can do the numbers. It's a very simple formula. So Jim, to tell you exactly what how we came up with the results we came up with, because it's basically looking back at a 30-year look back. And so I just don't think that's the best way to plan for our community, but that's maybe we're legally required. And like I said, that's my question. Is this legally required by commerce or state law? We're just following a path just because it's simple. And I don't think this is best for our community. That's just my opinion. I think a poor process, and I think we've just not acceded to some voices that basically, I don't know if that's going to give us best path of access to our community going forward.
Well, with that, is there another comment here? We'll go to public. Yeah.
So our entire comp plan that we've worked on for the past years based on the numbers with the updated tables they have in Exhibit A. So this is going to cause significant delays in our adoption process. I do want to fix that. We adopted some of the chapters in there, but not the full comp plan. Additional staffing requirements, consultant cost to the city of Airway Heights. I mean, this has some pretty broad implications. And then, in this, I understand Jim's position. We respect Jim in his position. We have to do what's best for our cities. Having a for-profit company come in here and tell us how to do our housing allocations, to me, that's inappropriate. But I also understand, where they're coming from. So as a city for Airway Heights, we would actually ask that, a recommendation to adopt this at Board of County Commissioners.
I would generally say, I'm sure the consultants that are hired to help on these things are also for-profit corporations themselves, so.
No, they are.
Kitty.
But I agree with asking the county to adopt the PTAC recommendation. I think we need to be able to move forward. There are opportunities to adjust if we do get our allocations wrong, but most of us, regardless of what our population allocation we end up with, we're trying to address these issues through zoning. And I know at the city, we're doing like 90% of what Jim's recommending or more, either at the comp plan level or with our zoning code changes. So it's not that we disagree with what he wants to do, but we do need to move forward. This is the tool we have right now, and I feel like we need to use it the way it's intended and see if it works. And then we can criticize it in 5 years if it's not working out. But this is what we have. This has always been a crystal ball. Before we had this methodology, we were doing it by hand, but it still isn't like we don't actually have control over this. We still have to do the zoning. We still have to make the changes.
I think we have had a process challenge. It seems like we're a struggle for clarity. I don't know if she's raising her hand behind you there.
Terry Cooper.
Oh, okay. When you finish, we'll go to it.
Okay.
So just, I feel like for transparency and just making sure that we're all on the same page, I would also encourage the Board of County Commissioners to not only reaffirm the process, but adopt the table so that way there's more clarity for everybody as to what we're exactly talking.
Okay. Terry? Mayor Cooper.
Yes, good morning. Thank you so much. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So the city of Medical Lake is in support of the resolution going to the Board of County Commissioners. There's a great deal of time that went into, and it was complicated, constantly bouncing between, are we talking about housing? Are we talking about population? Are we talking about income levels? And, you have the kind of the state dictating so much of this, and Commerce has all of its recommendations, and the planners trying to make sense of it all, and us trying to make sense of it all, as it seemed to be a continual, moving target, it seemed to me. But we did land on PTAC, they are the technical experts, and I did go over this with our senior planner, and I have concerns about where we're so far down the road in the planning, and it costs, especially small cities who have to pay consultants or staff to do this heavy lift. And the Prime A is where everybody landed. And I believe the simple solution right now is to follow PTAC's recommendation and fix that, get the right table, get the resolution so we can all move forward. Some of the small cities have already adopted the plan using Prime A because they thought that was the method, because that is the one we had all agreed on. I do support a homeowner, Mullet, and Mr. Frank, I support so much of what you're talking about. I don't know that moving forward prohibits that from happening, but if we go back to Prime A, get the table in the right place, at least it gets the numbers, in particular for Airway Heights and some of those others, get some numbers in a place where we can actually build and grow. So anyway, the City of Medical Lake is in support of following PTAC recommendations. It seems like it's better to fix something, a known error now, than it is to let's just go with, yeah, close enough, and then fix it 5 years down the road. That a lot happens in 5 years. And we're in a pretty serious situation economically. So I just for the city's sake and the planner's sake, and that we're almost to getting these adopted. So I won't keep repeating myself, but we are in support of the PTAC recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. And I do want to go to the public. I know we've got a few folks who want to speak. Did you have a comment, Councilman?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask about the process. I noticed that we didn't have an action item to make a recommendation today. And I know there was a reference of a 21-day notification here for a public hearing. So are we just trying to come up with consensus today, and then we would notify for the public hearing at the next steering committee meeting then? Is that the process that this is
Well,
following?
is there a need for a hearing? I mean, if the commissioners are going to take this up one way or the other, is there a need for us to have a hearing on this? It's just a recommendation of the county.
Our sense is that if there's a consensus among the steering committee to augment the original resolution adopting the methodology by adding the housing table, we will get that ready as a resolution for the Board of County Commissioners on their own time. And yes, there's a 21-day window on doing that. So it'll be a kind of a 30-day piece. That said, if this group wants to take a formal stand and say, we want to make a resolution and it's a formal recommendation to the steering committee, it's entirely within your purview, and it is normally the way you do business. We would set this up for a public hearing at your May meeting. Yeah, with a formal resolution from the steering committee.
Yeah.
Terry,
Mayor Cooper?
Yes. Is there anything that in the rules of order that would prohibit us from adding this as an action item today? There's been so much delay already, and if there's consensus among the group, is there anything that keeps us from adding that as an action item today? And if so, please advise.
Mayor, are you asking about the establishment of a hearing at the next meeting, or to make this formal recommendation today to the commissioners?
That the SCEO would vote today to send this forward as a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners to follow the PTAC. Yeah.
Sorry, Mayor. Generally speaking, and I am not an attorney, but we normally follow at the very least a noticing procedure that would say we would provide a 15-day notice of any agenda item that is going to be acted on by a public body. That allows the public to participate knowing there's going to be a decision made. In the county's adopted public participation program for the 26 comprehensive plan update, which the steering committee is subject to because it's a creature of the county board. They adopted a 21-day notice for final action items to provide additional notice for public direction. So if the board wanted to vote formally, today would not be the day to do that, or it would be at risk of being challenged. And we would set that up for a May meeting.
Yeah, I would
You.
agree.
Could we move to seek consensus today to move forward with the resolution?
Yes.
That's what I'd like to see us do.
I would just throw out there real quick. I'd like to hear from the public first before we maybe make a motion on anything, but I would just throw out there for the commissioners or this body that perhaps we to put everybody at ease and to ensure that everybody's confident in this, that we ask county legal for some feedback on both, did we abide by the guidance, and is the process that we followed to get here the proper one? I just think get that feedback, and then it's a pretty easy decision once you have that, I think, feedback.
Well, at that point, it would just be an amendment to the resolution from the Board of County.
Well, it depends. We're gonna have a hearing here, then, you know, be in advance of that, but if not, it would be for the commissioners to ask for that. I mean, that's their prerogative. I'm just throwing that out there as a suggestion. Commissioner.
So, Scott, if I can sort of walk through here what I've heard here today. So the Board of County Commissioners adopted a resolution back in January 25 that was the population allocations. Were later, the housing allocations were released from the state. A lot of what was presented in this presentation, other folks have touched on it, said can, may, recommended. I didn't hear any shall, must, required. PTAC moved forward with the housing allocations, even though the BOCC never adopted the housing allocation. We had still only adopted the population. Had PTAC just moved forward with the population allocations, not the housing allocations, would that have been acceptable by Commerce?
I can't answer that directly because I don't work for Commerce, I work for you. I think we can ask that question. I think what's the veracity of that recommendation? Is it ignored at your peril, or is it something else?
Because my question would be, if it would have been permitted to just move forward with the population numbers, why did PTAC decide to use the housing allocations? Who directed PTAC to use something that hadn't been adopted by the BOCC?
I want to clarify one point. What the board adopted was the methodology itself. And so that didn't change. What changed what were the numbers you put into the machine before you cranked the box?
Yeah.
So there was no reason to question the resolution. You adopted the proper methodology that everyone agreed on. Do that. The inputs are what changed later. And there's still the argument to be made, and Commerce can answer the question, directly of its own, commitment and veracity of that recommendation. I think what you're hearing from PTAC though is to go back and change that back to a different input now is to take a lot of work that's been done, both time and expense, and have to go back and redo it, rather than put it in blunt terms, hold your nose and vote for something that doesn't entirely work, that we don't entirely know yet. But we've had the chance to now say we're going to revise this and look at how it works literally on an annual basis and say, how did we do with this tool? We're recommending, or at least we're wanting to consider that since there's still disagreement on the tool, but most of the communities have used this in good faith to go forward, let's adopt it and then let's fix it. Which is why we introduced the reconciliation process a while back, seeing this on the horizon. And we've all agreed that the formal reconciliation process is more appropriate for, the buildable lands counties, and not to get into the weeds, but the PTAC has agreed to review, monitor, and report those results as if we were going to then reconcile those in the future effort. So is it a perfect system? No, it's a brand new tool. The rules changed in the middle of our work. We're seeing that reflected now. On the county side, though.
Did rules change, or did somebody just make a decision to use the housing numbers as opposed to the population number? And if so, who made the decision to switch from population to housing? I know that the housing numbers came out, but was there a requirement to switch to those numbers rather than just stick with the population numbers? And if it wasn't required, who made the decision to switch?
We're advised by Commerce to use housing share.
Advised or required?
That is how the tool was designed.
Okay.
So you would want to use it to how it was designed. So we switched to housing share. And I am reminded that on the meeting last year, January 29th, which is the weird time, there was a presentation that showed that we had erroneously used the population as the input, and we recommended using housing. And at that time, we all made sure we were using housing. Proceeded on. Still using the same methodology.
Okay, I think there might be some other perspectives that are just from the public that they want to share, and we can take those into consideration as we decide what direction we want to take here. So why don't we go to the public? I've got one sign up, but I know there's some others, so I'll call Darren first, and then we'll make a call for additional comments and go from there.
If I might defer, there's a really smart expert role as a solution, are not making sense to you. Maybe you can offer a bit more help before we testify, and that would be Jim Frank. If I could defer mine.
Yeah, Jim, if you want to go ahead.
Will you come up to?
Microphone purposes.
Right there.
Yeah, just in here somewhere.
Yeah,
You're
thank
fine.
you. I'm Jim Frank. I'm representing an Affordable Housing Alliance. I ran Greenstone Corporation for a lot of years. I'm not actively involved in it anymore. I do want everyone to know that Greenstone Corporation has capacity for thousands of housing units. All of them are inside the urban growth boundary, Liberty Lake, North Spokane. I should send a thank you letter to anybody that's going to restrict the expansion of housing capacity in Spokane County, because all it's doing is making our land more valuable. I'm not here for that purpose. There's other people running Greenstone now. I'm here trying to meet the purposes of House Bill 1220, which is find ways to provide housing for low and medium income families. Been working with Habitat for the last 4 years, been working with Spokane Housing Ventures, been working with small housing providers like Chauncey Jones, Black Small Home Builder. That's why I'm here. I'm not here for any other reason. I've attended almost every one of these meetings, these steering committee meetings, for 2.5 years, either in person or virtually. So I've understood everything that's happened during that period of time. And when PTAC made this recommendation in January, I was expecting that we're going to have an opportunity to comment on it. But when it was at your meeting in January, if you go back and look at your hearing, it was the last item on the agenda, and no opportunity for public comment was allowed. I thought it was going to happen at the next meeting in March, but it didn't. And we kept on asking, when are we going to get an opportunity to comment on this? It never came. So I asked for a public records request. And I got quite a bit, because I'm trying to understand how, if all you're doing is taking the existing population allocation that you approved for rural Spokane County, 4,700 people was the population allocation that you approved for rural Spokane County. How on earth can you go through some simple process and that ends up resulting in 6,195 houses? Like, what process did you go through that resulted in 1.4 houses for every person that you allocated? Like, that made no sense to me. You're converting population to housing. If you were to take the average housing family size in Spokane County at 2.5 persons and divide it into the 4.7, you get less than 2,000 housing units. And yet they're allocating 6,000 housing units. So this didn't make any sense. There's no way that you started with that housing allocation and ended up with 6,000 housing units. It's like, makes no sense. It's nonsense. I'm trying to understand, how did that happen? So I did a public records request. I got quite a bit of information from that. And then I started talking to Commerce. I asked them if I could have access to the HAP program, so they gave it to me. So I used the HAP program, and then I talked to the Office of Financial Management and asked them, you know, how does their database work and how is their database integrated into the HAP program? And so I learned quite a bit. I learned quite a bit about how the HAP program works and how the data from population from OFM got integrated into it. It's not that complicated, to be honest with you. The Terrell showed you the cover sheet of the Commerce guidance. It's 100 pages. I read it twice, and it gives a very good explanation of what HAP is, how it works, and the logic behind it. And while I might criticize some of the ideas in it, it's all what I call rational. You can understand why they did it and how they did it. And it's, at the end of the day, it's an Excel spreadsheet. It's an Excel spreadsheet. The data is in the spreadsheet. There's user input numbers. You can input the user input. It's out the answers. And not complicated program, but there's something important about it that apparently PCAP doesn't understand. But I've come to understand because of my conversations with OFM and with Commerce. When you adopted your population allocation was based on a look back period from 2010 to 2013. And you used actual OFM data for that period of time, that 13-year period. And that gave you a trend line for each of the jurisdictions of what their growth patterns were and what percentage of the growth of the population growth was occurring in those jurisdictions. And so you set your population allocation based on that. So your population allocation for rural Spokane County during that period of time represented the actual growth that was happening in rural Spokane County during that time period. And it's been restricted because that's exactly the purpose of GMA, is to restrict development in rural areas. So it represents that. In the HAP spreadsheet, the Commerce OFM projection is embedded in the spreadsheet. The data is embedded in the spreadsheet. And the Commerce, but the OFM population projection that's embedded in HAP is a 30-year projection. It's from 2020 to 2050. And when Commerce does a population projection, they use a look back period that's the same as the forward population projection. So if they're doing a 5-year projection, they use a 5-year look back period. If they're doing a 30-year projection, they're using a 30-year look back period. That's the way they do that. Now,
Maybe just two more minutes. We just.
Yeah, this is
I know.
honestly,
Very important. I know.
this is very important. And I know that there's at least 5 other people there that will give me their time.
Very good.
So that 30-year population projection went back to 1990. So 2020 to 2050 was the forward projection based on data from 1990 to 2020. So embedded in the HAP program is actual census tract data for 1990, 2000, 2010, and 2020. And they use that to calculate the housing. So you chose the middle tract. They came up with they used that methodology, that look back period, determine how much growth you're going to have using the middle tract. And the middle tract said you're going to have 100,000 population, and that And the HAP program has a formula that converts that population to housing and then allocates it to bands. That was 75,000 housing units. Under Commerce guidance, you are required to use HAP through that step. You have to use HAP to determine the total number of housing units being allocated to Spokane County. After that step, you are not required to use HAP at all. You can choose any methodology you like. And Melissa, I'm sure she'll tell you that, because the words are as clear as can be in the Commerce guidance. You can use any methodology you want. Now, what happens is, if you use HAP, in the C tab, there's a way of calculating housing share in the C tab on the spreadsheet. But what it does is it uses the OFM data that's in the spreadsheet to calculate the housing share. That creates a different housing allocation than the one you approved. You approved the housing allocation based on a look back from 2010 to 2023. But if you're going to allocate housing share using HAP, it's going to go back to 1990. It's exactly what happened. So I confirmed this with OFM, and I confirmed it with Laura Hodgson at Commerce. Now, the problem with that is that that's 10 or 15 years before the GMA was even adopted. We didn't have a compliant urban growth boundary until 2001. In 1990, Airway Heights was a gas station on US 2. In 1990, the city of Liberty Lake didn't even exist. We didn't start building houses in Liberty Lake until the late 1990s and early 2000s. So if you use data from the early 1990s and early 2000s to formulate a population growth share, it's going to be completely misleading, and it's going to include a significant amount of time that was before GMA was even adopted, and it's not going to reflect current growth patterns. So that's, you're making this all really complicated, but that's all it is. It's all it is. And the reason that this rural category is so high is because during that period in 1990 and the early 2000s, and look, I'm going to be 80 years old this year. I was building houses then. Most of you, some of you are probably not even born, okay? So there was a time, and this is documented by the work that PTAC did, by the way. There was a time, if you take unincorporated Spokane County, there were more houses being built, what is currently outside urban growth boundary than inside. There's tremendous amount of growth in Moran Prairie that's outside of the urban growth boundary. Otis Orchards, it's outside of the urban growth boundary. For Pete's sakes, East Valley High School built a junior high and a middle school at state line to accommodate all the growth that was happening outside of what's currently the urban growth boundary. So when you use that data, it shows a much higher percentage of population allocation to rural Spokane County. And that's what it shows. That's why that number is so high. And it's also why Liberty Lake and Airway Heights are low, because during that period of time, there wasn't much growth there. So it doesn't affect only rural Spokane County, it affects all these other jurisdictions. If you use that, you are altering, this is not a question of using A or B or C. It's a question of altering the population allocation. You've altered population allocation when you use HAP. You have to understand that, that's all. You're free to make whatever decision you want, and you're free to allocate the population of the housing any way you want. It's exactly what Commerce says. But you have to understand that if you take the PTAC recommendation, you're using development patterns that come from the early 1990s that don't reflect at all what is happening today. And there's a lot of opportunity for affordable housing growth in Liberty Lake. There's a lot of opportunity for the Airway Heights and other jurisdictions. And that cannot be closed off and that cannot be ignored. Thank you.
That's true. Okay. Anything else from anybody? Darren, you ceded your time, so we had you go for quite a while, so I want to be respectful. What's that?
I just wanted him to go first.
Well, yeah, but
Our comments will be directed based on what is just recorded.
no, I understand. We could just hold the comments for just a second. Let's make sure there's no other comments from anybody. Yeah.
Hi, thank you all, Elizabeth Tellison with Winston Cachet, working with Mr. Frank and a number of folks who develop in and around Spokane County. And I just want to kind of refocus the energy on the process. And some of you will remember, because you were working very hard on this project in the last round, that the population allocation was a portion of the problem that led to the many appeals and the issues that were dealt with through the settlement agreement. What is being proposed to me rings very similar to what got the county in trouble last round, which is, well, it's close enough, we'll deal with it later. And you all did your work in those years that led up to the population allocation. You understood that the OFM data wasn't reflecting what was actually being built around our community. So you made that adjustment. You made a recommendation, the VOCC adopted it, and then you adopted a methodology that used that population. And now the thought is, well, it all changed, don't worry about it. We'll go through a new process and we'll just adopt what everybody's been using. But that presumes a result that you all, I would suggest, maybe aren't going to control. You are going to be given additional information, as you have been through the discussions that we've had over the last few months, particularly because it is such a glaring difference, the rural allocation and how that is going to be spread around to these cities and where it's going to go. That is going to be something that is going to warrant careful analysis. That effort has been done already. We aren't here asking you to reinvent the wheel. You've done the work. It is difficult that the path has been gone down on a proposal that nobody really understood at the time. We think, and we have encouraged you to go and reaffirm what you've already done. Don't try to retrofit this process with a we'll deal with it later. To me, that does not follow the public participation spirit. It doesn't follow the directives of your agreements. So I'm just asking you guys to follow the process, encouraging you to not go back and re-question what you've already done, because it did look at a lot of these issues that we're talking about with or without hat. So I appreciate your time. I know there's a lot of work that goes into this process. I've been watching it. I understand that it is painstaking, but I don't think we need to reinvent a wheel here. I think we can move forward, that the cities can continue to do their work, the county can continue to do its work, and we can get to defensible comp plans here in the next few months. So thank you all.
I saw another hand. Yep.
Good morning. My name is Daniel Leroy. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Habitat for Humanity Spokane. Habitat for Humanity develops permanently affordable homeownership opportunities for families at 80% of the area median income and below. And so when we saw the allocations pertaining to 80 to 50% AMI, that is exactly sort of our specialty, and that's what we pay a lot of attention to. And so the 728 units of 50 to 80% AMI housing slated for rural Spokane County is of particular concern. It sounds like through this discussion, there is some consensus about addressing that concern, but I just want to sort of reinforce that from our perspective as developers for that income bracket, developing in rural Spokane County with a 20-acre minimum lot size, well, septic, is infeasible for us. And I wanted to sort of make sure that that's addressed. And I also think it does bring up sort of concerns concerning the Mercer Island decision. I think if that allocation moves forward, I think it's pretty hard to defend how that would actually be implemented. So I think this not only brings up sort of practical development concerns for us, but I think there's also sort of GMA compliance concerns there as well. So as you're moving forward, I wanted to encourage this group to make that change to bring more housing into the urban growth area, but particularly that lower income housing that is currently allocated for the rural area. We would really like to see that brought into the UGA so that it can be developed sort of with denser sort of infrastructure supported communities that will, I think, help our community move forward and provide affordable housing opportunities that we really need. So thank you very much.
Good morning, I'm Bonnie Mager and I do not represent Cheney, but we are planning development there. Two things that came out of this meeting, I think it was very enlightening hearing what Jim had to say, and I would agree. And from my perspective, living just outside of Cheney and hoping to live in Cheney, is that, and having been part of the GMA process from its very beginning, watching all this happen, my understanding was that these reviews are there so that the small cities, the big cities can look at, did we make the right decisions and what do we do for the future? And in Cheney in particular, from my perspective, they put a whole lot of land south of the railroad track in basalt and wetlands, which obviously didn't get developed because it wasn't reasonable, it wouldn't pencil out. So now the opportunity is to adjust the urban growth boundary to where it belongs, going north on land that is developable. And the reasoning behind that is any land that has been reasonably developable and pencils out is being developed and bought. So it's not that Cheney to look way back and say, oh, you didn't develop this land, therefore you're not growing. You really weren't growing because it wasn't economically reasonable to develop the land that's there, except for what's already almost all have been developed. So that goes against the goal. And what the man from Habitat said is absolutely true. We can make all these rules and stuff, but you're not, and adjust the population or what can be built inside the city. But if it doesn't pencil out, you're not going to get affordable housing. It just isn't going to happen. So I'm just asking you to take a look at what is actually real and try to make those decisions. And I know they're difficult ones because I've sat in your seat before. So thank you.
Derek,
We'll be brief. Where do we want to go? I know we've talked a lot about formulas and the difficulty of using 30-year look backs to make 30-year projections. But where do we want to go? Every Heights is looking to do 5 major economic projects that we know about. And yet today, 3/4 of the people who are working at that Amazon plant are taking the bus from out there in Hilliard. Does that make sense to anybody? Do we really want to plan on growth for places like Liberty Lake that didn't exist back when we were counting these numbers? Because here is the realistic data of today. Work for the Spokane Association of Realtors. We're also part of the Spokane Housing Coalition, who's been trying desperately to just get you guys to build more houses. Today, in the city of Spokane, how many buildable lots are for sale today? 3. How many are for sale in all of Spokane County? 27. Is there extra land available that can be developed? Yeah, there's about 200 places that are for sale that you could spend money and time to access and make it into a buildable lot. We just don't have the land. But where do we want to go? This isn't about the formulas. And clearly, if you're trying to put 30-year projections into a 30-year look forward, that bad data is going to become bad results. And I think that's what we're seeing. I mean, I'm no expert. When I look at the numbers and I see that there's maybe 23,000 new people could grow in the rural area, but we're gonna give them 17,000 homes, or the city of Spokane growing 23,000 with 23,000 homes allocated. Last year, the city of Spokane issued 146 single-family residential housing permits, 146. They're tapped out from a market perspective. Why is this so important? Why is the work today to make that decision today, not thinking about 5 years out? You're getting beat over the head economically by what's about 5 miles away from the city limits of Spokane Valley. Today, they are making plans for 27,500 homes in Kootenai County in the next 4 years. That county, in this time frame we're talking about, has grown 39% from the mistakes we've made in not focusing on growth and development in our county. Supply and demand has resulted in escalating prices of land. The price of your house that went up, the value of your house, it's not because of your house. It's literally the dirt underneath it. That lot, 2017, 2018, that Joel's folks were buying for about 75,000 a piece. The ones for sale today are closing in on 200,000. Just think of the social impacts of what that has created for the people trying to live and work in this community who have not seen their wage growth match that price escalation. I cannot express enough urgency of how you have to make the right decision. And I know we're talking about formulas, but you have options. The state allows you to think aspirationally. And I'd ask for you to do that. Thank you.
Is there anything else? Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Melissa Olofai-Tooley. I'm the senior planner working with Spokane County from the Department of Commerce. So I've been referenced a lot in this meeting. I will say my colleague Laura Hodgson is also listening online. She's our housing planning and data manager and kind of our HAPT expert. So if you have questions for her, she's available until 10:45. She has to go to a dentist appointment. So just wanted to put that out there. I did want to respond to a couple of the points that have come up, a couple of the questions, and I am available to answer any questions, as is Laura. I really appreciate this discussion. I wanted to commend Mr. Frank. He explained the commerce guidance quite well. And I wanted to just emphasize when it comes to the HAPT tool, it might be helpful to think of it in kind of two pieces. So the first thing the HAPT tool does is once the county selects its countywide population projection from the OFM range, you plug it into the HAPT tool and it spits out the countywide housing allocation. So what you need to plan for, and not just the overall number, but divided by income band, right? You're all familiar with that. And so your job as a county is to ensure that you have sufficient capacity at the different income bands countywide. Now, how you get there, you do have, there is an element of local input, local control there. You get to make that decision. The HAPT tool includes now 3 methodologies that you can choose from. But you can also opt to kind of go your own way as long as there's agreement. But if you do opt to use one of the HAPT methodologies, even though it is a tool provided by Commerce, it's still a local decision what inputs are put in there. So for Spokane County, it was decided that you would go with kind of a continuation of past building trends. And so those were the numbers that were initially put in there based on population and then shifted to housing. But I did just want to be very clear that this is an optional tool. We recommend using it, but it's optional. And you have control over the numbers that are put in that then spit out for each jurisdiction, the numbers of housing units at income levels that need to be planned for. We would support, Commerce does support the county shifting some of their allocation around if, you know, to align with local policy and the GMA from the rural area to the urban growth area. That makes a lot of sense. So the Board of County Commissioners, the steering committee did opt to move forward with A prime, which we support. We were asked at one point in the process for clarification on the inputs, and I believe that's what prompted the recommendation that the tool is intended to be used with housing share as the input. So Commerce supports that. It's not mandatory, but it is something Commerce would recommend. So we're very supportive. And we have been working closely with all of the planners on the PTAC throughout this process, both Laura and I. And we support the A prime by housing share numbers. So just, I know I submitted a letter, so that is very clear. One thing that Mr. Frank brought up about the look back issue and the 30 years versus 13 years, I think I might ask Laura to speak to that a bit from Commerce's perspective, but I think the fact that it kind of depends again on the local input. So what numbers you're putting in and what you're basing that on, where that data is coming from, that might be more of the thing to look at, because again, the HAP tool does use the OFM numbers, which are based on the 30-year look back, because we're planning for the next 30 years, but those are giving you countywide numbers, not numbers specific to each jurisdiction. So just wanted to bring that up. And then one other thing I wanted to highlight here, I know you're not making a decision today, but there is guidance in the Washington Administrative Code about transparency and having the numbers be publicly accessible during the periodic update. I had it pulled up here. It's WAC 365-196-410 2C Roman numeral 3 III and then capital E. And I can share that with Scott and the PTAC folks. But what that says, and this is the WAC, so it's official guidance from the state. It's not the RCW, but it is official guidance. And it says that counties and cities' allocations of projected housing needs by economic segment, permanent supportive housing and emergency housing must be in a public-facing document and used consistently in their comprehensive plans. So for that reason, among others, we do encourage the Board of County Commissioners to adopt those numbers. It doesn't have to be in a resolution. There's other ways that counties can do that. Some adopt the numbers into their CPPs. Some have a public-facing memo from the county that's posted online. So there's different ways to do it, but we do encourage you to move forward with that. And so with that, I'll stop talking, but I am available for questions and Laura's here too. Thank you.
So just hearing from Laura if she's willing. Okay. Any other comments from the public? Not seeing any. Okay.
Do we want to ask the PTAC to address some of the concerns that were raised?
Sure.
Somebody want to do that?
Cheryl or anybody else if you'd like to.
No pressure, guys.
Which one?
We need a volunteer.
We're voluntold.
I'm happy to answer some questions. At some point, I may defer to Kevin Freitlach. He was the planner among the PTAC who did most of the technical work, so he could probably speak to the technical questions better than I could. But I am happy to answer any questions that people have and then defer to Kevin as necessary. It looks like a comment may come. Oh, sorry, Spencer Gardner. I'm the planning director for the city of Spokane.
Questions for Spencer or Spencer, do you want
Maybe I can start with a quick summary of where I think things are from PTAC's perspective. First of all, I want to be really clear, from the PTAC perspective, we're not talking about retrofitting numbers or changing numbers in some way. I think it's been pretty clear today, what was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners was a methodology. At no point did it adopt population inputs or housing inputs. The question of what the inputs were to the tool was silent in the resolution. So I think that's part of the lack of clarity that's there, is that the resolution doesn't really say what the numbers are, what the inputs are. It says we're adopting a methodology. That's all the resolution says. And we feel, and we have, we referenced already the presentation from January 29th of last year, where there was significant discussion around the moving from the population inputs, which was what was used in an earlier version of the HAPT tool, to the housing inputs, which is, in our view, and based on the commerce guidance we've received, is what the tool was designed to use. So our desire throughout this whole process has been to use the tool as it was designed by using the housing inputs. I think our other concern relating to the fact that these numbers have been used broadly throughout the region. I know at least in the city of Spokane, and it sounds like in most of the other jurisdictions, we have been using the housing input numbers throughout our entire comp plan process. So all of our public facing work, all the outreach we've done, our EIS, everything that we have done related to our comprehensive plan that the public, the people in the city of Spokane have seen, is based on that housing input, not on a population input. So if we were to shift course now, I think from the public's perspective, at least within the city of Spokane, that would look like a significant change compared to what we have done throughout our process. So that's just a quick overview. And again, if there are specific technical questions, I may end up deferring to Kevin.
Spencer, real quick, maybe I don't have this correct. So when we chose the housing option, you guys pushed that through and wasn't voted on, but it was discussed. I remember that discussed. Does it mandate you use a 30-year look back, or does it allow a different look back period? Is that the actual?
That would be a good one for Kevin maybe to address. He's been the one who's really gotten into the internals of the tool, so I'll invite him up to answer that question.
Kevin Freibot, Senior Planner for the City of Spokane. So your question was, did we choose to use a 30-year look back? How HAPT generates the countywide numbers using that OFM data, that is not in our control. It just does that. Also, it's important to note that the OFM number for that 30 years is what's used to generate the countywide numbers, which again, we have no control over. It is entirely determined by the population forecast for the whole county that was selected. The OFM median is what we called it. When that's input in, it spits out the allocation for countywide. That's what uses that 30-year. When we generated the, of course, the second I stand up. When we generated the growth share by housing share, or the housing share numbers, when we were able to figure out a way to calculate those are based ultimately on the population to each of the cities within the county. That spread was generated discussed at SCEO and adopted by BOCC by looking at 2010 to 2023. So it is within the realm of GMA. It is within the realm of as many years as we could get accurately from OFM, but those are different than the forecast. The forecast looks back 30 years, generates forward 30 years. These are the reported population estimates from OFM for every year. And then every time the census comes around and correct them to match up with what the census, because census is a full report. It's not a guess. So just to be clear, the countywide numbers, yes, it uses the OFM 30-year look back to find 30 years in the future. We have zero control over that. But for the local numbers, it was 2010 to 2030, or 2010 to 2023, which is.
It would have been an opportunity for this group to have had the discussion about that and actually decided to go different.
It actually was discussed in the PTAC's memo on the population allocation. We provided how we did it. It was discussed at SCEO and ultimately SCEO.
Was discussed at that.
30-year is an artifact of OFM. We don't have any control or ability to see how that works.
It would have been nice to see.
I agree.
Process to see that happens. I don't think any of us understood. We're looking back 30 years for that.
If it helps, the OFM population forecast, we, as a county, as a region, we must use their forecast. And so the method of how they generate that, yeah, maybe that would be a good thing to explore.
But if there was an
the ability.
opportunity to have made some amendments to what we did.
So can I ask the question? So the resolution the Board of County Commissioners adopted that had a table attached that we're saying is wrong. What was that table?
I don't know. That was not from PTAC. I believe that was county staff originally. I'm not
Well,
sure.
regardless of who did it, what is the table that we're saying is wrong?
It was the HAP table using population share inputs.
So you could say the Board of County Commissioners took an official action, adopted a document, included that table attached, and then we changed course without any input from this group or the Board of County Commissioners.
So, I want to clarify, the resolution doesn't, the table was included in an attachment. The attachment's not referenced in the resolution in any way, so our reading of the resolution.
Extra document.
I think it was provided in the agenda packet. I don't know, Scott, maybe you can speak to that. So it was present in the materials that went with it, but the resolution at no point references that attachment.
So they don't need to change it then. If it was just a document and a packet, then that's not an issue to change.
I think, well, did you have something?
That's cool. The resolution adopting the methodology is not being suggested for any changes. The supporting information at the time was what PTAC was using. That had changed from the 29th going forward, and as Spencer said and others, all these jurisdictions use that in their own public participation programs. But there was no specific adoption of population share. It was the HAP tool, but it was using the inputs we had at the times.
Is it legally required to approve a population allocation? I mean, does the county at some point have to vote on that?
Well, it's actually a different thing, Joel. The county board did approve the population allocations in a separate resolution earlier.
What was the housing population?
No, just the population allocations.
So we were working with population allocation, so.
Yeah, the ones that came
Right,
from OFM
using population allocation.
and were split out to the communities. That was adopted and ratified by the county board of commissioners. The next step of taking those population numbers and putting them in HAP is what we were doing at the time. And that's when the board adopted the HAP methodology, and the appended document used the population numbers. It wasn't until later in the month of January, the January 29th meeting of this group, that the recommendation from Commerce to switch those to housing allocations became real.
So resolution does not need to change, but the documents in which we made the decision or the recommendation to the BBOC. Is that what I'm getting?
We don't see any reason to amend the resolution adopting the methodology. And we're not hearing that from PTAC, we're not hearing that from Commerce or any other group.
They just want us to use
What the request is essentially to say, to have the board adopt now the actual allocation numbers by community, by income band in the adjusted apt tool, so that becomes a memorialized document.
And that is their exhibit A that they presented to.
Yes.
Okay. Mayor Cooper is on with a question or a comment.
You. I really appreciate all the public comment. It's actually really helpful to understand in a broader sense. So, so in kind of tracking along with this all along, if the resolution doesn't need to change, I think it should still come back. We can not include a table at all. We've adopted a methodology. We do have autonomy to where those numbers are allocated. We can take the numbers from the unincorporated county and move them into the UGA. That's what I think probably should happen. And we can amend outcomes. So we still have some autonomy and some ability to move things around. So I think it should come back either the Board of County Commissioners or some other, we have to deal with what's been passed, however that's going to happen. But I think that we've adopted a methodology. We can even exclude the table or adopt prime A. It was a housing model that we were all working on. And then we can move the allocations, whatever that number is. We can justify why we're moving those numbers into the UGA area, everything from rural to UGA, and we can talk about Liberty Lake and Airway Heights and our growth and the actuals, and I think that's how we can protect ourselves against any challenge there. And for every reason, we want to build within the UGA because that's where we can provide water and sewer, and it's those kinds of things that make it more expensive, and also trying to build one house here, one house there in the rural. And so, of course, all the small cities are interested in moving their UGA area because we had an anti-growth strategy, at least in my city. And we had some almost 400 acres, 300 to 400 acres, all put in places that you couldn't build on purpose. And then they get locked in there and they can't be moved. So this is an opportunity to do those swaps, but I think, just like we make justifications for other things, whatever the number is, we move everything into UGA. And so those are my thoughts there. But I wanted to add that after hearing everybody's comments, we've got to be able to build houses. We've got to get them in the UGA, and it's got to be where it's the most affordable place to build. Or we're not going to make any traction at all. So I hope I captured the sense of what those who made the public comments, because all of those made a lot of sense, and I didn't hear anything I disagree with. So it sounds like the process got ahead of the lack of a better word, the preferred outcome. So anyway, I think that we can get to an answer for all of us that's going to help us move forward economically.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess the question for me is, and I know that probably the general desire, I assume, is that we would move those allocations into the UGA, but if we really believe in this process and these numbers, I guess why would not the first thought be that you should be expanding the UGA to accommodate this rural growth? It almost sounds like Commerce is asking us to push more growth outside of municipalities. And so I'm just curious, why is that not the thought that these are the numbers Commerce says we're supposed to follow, or I guess supposedly, and so therefore we should be expanding the UGA to accommodate all of this growth?
Mr. Chairman, let me weigh in on that a little bit. The current EIS analysis underway is going to provide some guidance for that comment. In looking at the three alternatives, the do nothing alternative, and alternative one, alternative two for the county. Alternative one, as you recall, is an entire infill development. Can we accommodate the forecast growth in population and housing by simply changing our development regulations? The answer is the mathematics says yes. The practical side is the market doesn't respond to that. It has not responded to that historically over even the 10-year history, let alone the 25-year history of growth in Spokane County. The other one is, if we do nothing to our regs, what does that do for the urban growth area? We use up everything that we've got, and we would need at normal rates of growth, 4.5 units an acre. There would be a need for as much as 1,000 or more new acres of land outside of the existing urban growth area boundary, at least the metro urban growth area boundary. Those are the kind of the extremes that we're looking at. GMA doesn't look favorably on alternative two. It's like you really need to think about your development regulations in the context of state regulations, including GMA. That's going to take some pressure off of that, say, 1,000 acres. But it does mean if we're going to build at the rates and at the kind of products that we're talking about, we have to have land available to do that that's in the pattern of development. And that's what we're going to start to see in the EIS that's coming out. This group will see the first results of that at the May meeting. What does that translate into when it's starting to look at a map? How does it fit those areas that we looked at? Ms. Mager and Mayor Cooper were both alluding to the swap side of that, and we're working with the smaller communities to do exactly that. Cheney has 110 acres or more that are really unbuildable. The question to our predecessors is, why did you think that should be in the UGA to start with? As we right-size this UGA for the entire county, we're going to make those adjustments. You know, Medical Lake wants to move some of its UGA from a very challenging area south of Fairchild to its eastern border that makes more sense for growth and also provides a pattern of urban services that might be able to attach to the lake for environmental purposes. Airway Heights wants to move some of theirs from an equally untenable northern position to a western position, Deer Park for other things. So there's a swap that's going to go on. The overall UGA acreage, though, is very likely going to be smaller than we have today. It's just going to be in different places as we've managed those patterns of growth based on housing allocations and based on the historic growth of the county. Now taking into account that we're probably going to accommodate 3,000 to 4,000 more units that are currently marked for that rural category back into an urban growth area. And so that will show up in the EIS discussions, which will come to this group. It'll come to public comment. That will guide a recommendation to our commissioners on a preferred alternative that then gets studied in more detail, which will then, if we can stay on track with that, we'll show up with this group at a June meeting and probably back to our commissioners in July for an adoption of a preferred alternative. And that's where a lot of this will finally be laid out. Commissioner.
Can I ask, it seems, I mean, based on what I'm hearing is we're in agreement, there's too many, with the current method using the housing allocation, that too many housing units are assigned to rural unincorporated county. We're discussing, okay, we can bring those in and distribute those within UGA. Does this method allocate too many or too little housing units to any of the cities? I mean, we've talked about rural county. What about the individual cities? Are they given or not given an adequate or appropriate amount of housing units? I mean, because it sounds like we're just focusing on just the inflated number for rural unincorporated county. What about the individual cities?
Commissioner, you're correct. The rural numbers are the ones that we still have the most flexibility in adjusting and reallocating into a more urban form. What PTAC is suggesting is that the allocations to the communities should be left as they are in the HAPT tool from January 29th of 25. As we've noted in PTAC and with this group since I've worked with you, the cities are entirely on their own to make their capacity analysis and adjust their capacities and adjust their zoning to make these things happen. But they must show their work. And for the city and the bigger places, it's through the environmental impact statement, same as the county's going through. So yeah, we will all be looking at the City of Spokane's final EIS on their preferred alternative to say, how are you intending to meet your obligations and meet your capacities of doing this? That was also why the small r reconciliation process was like, as the city does its own analysis on this, that was allowing the idea of having an interlocal agreement to come back to the steering committee and say, here's our impression, or here was our forecast, this is what we're seeing in the market. They're not aligning. Let's get back together and talk about how we're monitoring and maybe adjusting our growth. That has to be a future step, regardless of what this group does today. But we are putting that in place to allow that to happen as these go forward. So all of that said, yes, the rural part is what we have capacity. We have control over moving today. What PTAC is recommending is don't change the allocations in the individual cities at this point.
So in terms of the initial recommendation that was introduced from PTAC for the county, it's sounding like that's not something that we need to address, that there is no issue. Is that right? That's kind of what I'm hearing.
Well, if the table's not in there, then there's no issue, right? Because we all agree on.
That's something I wanted to ask. So it was stated that the VOCC adopted a resolution, but the attached table, just ignore it because doesn't matter. I have a hard time believing our civil department would say, yeah, that's right. We put that in there for no purpose and it should be ignored. I have a really, really hard time that any of our departments that attach a table are under the impression that the table doesn't mean anything.
And I would agree with that. That table was the result of the methodology that was recommended to the board and the inputs that were known at the time, which were the population-based inputs. Those tables are completely valid. They are a valid representation of the time that they were adopted. It was later on that the PTAC and this committee moved from the population allocation to the housing allocation.
Okay,
So they're valid as they stand.
yeah, because I was gonna say, last month when we had the discussion about the tables, I pulled up in our resolution finder on the county's website, you get the resolution and those tables.
Memo
As one
attached.
yes, it is not
Correct.
something you have to go search for separately. It is a part of what was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners.
I'm really struggling to say that this committee made any decision when.
That's my point, is it was never voted on, I want to correct that, it wasn't voted on, it was discussed. I think there was a agreement, passive agreement in the room, but it wasn't voted on by, the steering committee, nor was it voted on by.
That
the
is
Spokane
accurate.
County. Yeah.
That is accurate. The memo from PTAC in late January suggested that, as we've heard over and over again, Commerce recommends we've changed to housing allocations for HAP. That's how it's designed it. And the memo from PTAC to this group said the PTAC did not believe there was any need to amend or change the county board resolution because they adopted the correct methodology. You just changed the input. But you're accurate, those new inputs and those new results were never formally adopted or recommended by this group to the BOCC. In a way, that's what PTAC is asking for now.
And those popped out new numbers. Like that's what we're getting at is, that methodology and that input popped out new numbers. So at this point, moving forward, what can we do to, within the recommendation of the PTAC, to move that forward?
Well, that's where we were talking earlier about the process of next board meeting, we should adopt a table, recommend that for adoption. The actual chart numbers.
Is that a motion, I guess, to put that on our agenda for the next meeting?
I would so move.
Second.
May I have a comment before we
go ahead, Mayor.
move on that, please? So I disagree that it's the table that was the problem. The methodology was fine, so it wasn't like everything was great. And then you have another problem too, that you never took public comment. So I think it's more than just the resolution was great, the table was wrong. Prime A was the housing model, and that's what was recommended to go forward, and that's not what was attached to the resolution. I think that you need to null and void that resolution completely, have a new resolution that's clean, and you need to allow public comment on that. Go back and do that process. If you're going to attach a table, make it prime A, or don't attach a table at all. And we need to all be prepared that we're going to amend those numbers at the end, because a 30-year look back, and I followed this all along. I heard 10-year, 20-year, 30-year, and all of it got mixed in. It was never clarified as to which applied to which input and output. You got your formulas in the Excel spreadsheet. As soon as you change one number, it changes everything. And we go, why does that happen, right? And it's pretty easy. It's the formula. And in the same way, it was constant confusion about, are we talking about housing population or income? Those all got convoluted and amalgamated in. And that's why it became confusing to the public and to me, frankly. But I think that to perfect this, we need to nullify that resolution, not just amend it. And we need to allow some public comment, and then we need to adopt a proper table if there's going to be one, and reference it in the document. So that's where I am, and I'm not sure what the motion was to do, but I think that's the process that we need to take, and I wouldn't support any other method there.
I agree with Mayor Cooper the motion, but thinking of too many things at the same time, but I think we need to clarify the 30-year look back is a projection for our over OFM medium, which we did adopt. We did properly do that part. So the 30-year projection, done deal. That's what we were working with for a long time. There's not confusion there. That's just the OFM medium, which tends to be what we adopt, like historically. The 14-year situation is the thing that went into the table that's figuring out the housing allocations and helping jurisdictions plan for how many units they need to accommodate. So they are separate issues. And that is clear to me, but this is my, third or fourth comp plan update that I've been involved in. But I support the motion because I think everything else she's saying totally makes sense. We should take public comment on it. We should adopt the table. And we should use the methodology that the tool is designed for, which is housing.
So let me ask you this, if we adopt the table, does that back us into a corner? Would it be better to not adopt any table and just the primary methodology? Because if you said, I mean, everybody up here, if we input one different number, we get different numbers that pop out.
Well, that's what I would ask for clarification maybe on the motion. Is the motion to specifically address the table, or is it maybe to have a hearing on this item overall? And we can make decisions within that as to how we address it.
So the intent of my motion was to have at our next meeting, a table specifically that we could have our public hearing on and take action on at the next meeting. And so that way we can, because there's too many different inputs. I think it would be best just to have a sped out table. Here's the results of what everybody's using. So that way we're more transparent.
Then if I'm hearing that the motion is for this committee to direct staff to prepare an item for a public hearing, including that table and the methodology for your next meeting.
I would very much be interested in a additional motion after this that would allow us to hear the broader items so that we can do, as Mayor Cooper said, consider a nullification, a recodification of the resolution if that's where we go, but importantly have that public input. I saw two hands over here. Commissioner.
So table based on population or housing?
Housing, the PTAC recommendation, like he was pointing to this table. But
So exhibit A.
That's what I'm hearing is the most queries from both PTAC and some of the other cities. So I would think that would be our starting point.
Any other input on this motion? Commissioner?
So do we, question for Mr. Chesney, does the table already reflect the change of moving some of the rural to the urban or metro area?
It does not.
I'm just wondering if we want to do my question would be, should we just do one motion that includes all of that? Back to the Board of County Commissioners, or do you think that's better done in two separate actions? To your point, the table might change it.
And that's exactly it.
And I don't want to have to adopt another table.
Or revisit this
That's a
in the
very,
future,
that's a very valid point. And I don't want to necessarily disagree with Mayor Cooper, but the resolution that the county commissioners adopted January 21st, 25, adopting the HAPT A prime methodology is valid. Whether the table is attached or not is sort of immaterial. The methodology is valid. And so if this group is fine with that and wants to rethink the allocations now from rural back to urban, you don't need to do any further action on the methodology. You made that recommendation to the commissioners in 25, they acted on it, it's done. If you want to wait until the analysis of where that rural population should be accounted for, that will probably push that discussion off until June. I don't see that we're going to be able to start from zero and make that in time to have something for your May meeting.
My concern with that is if there was a decision to do something different, I mean, time is already short and now it's even shorter. So.
And our comp plan is based on that number. That within this exhibit A, within that table, all the work from last year
in the global sense, the reallocation from the rural setting to an urban setting is going to be within the urban growth areas that are under the jurisdiction of the county. So it's not going to affect any of the individual comprehensive plans of the cities themselves.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I said, sorry.
Oh, okay. I'll go to Mayor Cooper and then we'll go to Councilmember Elizabeth.
Just briefly, Councilmember Cathcart, as you had suggested, I think we're maybe a two-step process here, but if we can get to the public hearing, and I would support that. And then maybe during the public hearing, you know, decisions will be made there as to how we're going to move forward and what's going to go again to the Board of County Commissioners. I think we can vet it out there, and then it probably is a two-step process. But I think getting that public hearing is going to be the critical piece, and then we can maybe get a little legal on, is it better to nullify that and have a brand new resolution just so that we get rid of that table altogether and it doesn't come up as a public record in the future that says this is valid. But anyway, that was all. I just thought maybe get the hearing and then move towards the next step. We'll know more after that hearing, I guess is how I'm feeling, but I do support the motion for the hearing.
We need to certainly support a friendly amendment to broaden what we're hearing. So Councilmember Linsky.
You partially answered my question that I was going to ask, but since the rural versus urban question is only affecting a county, do we really need the steering committee of elected officials to weigh in on that part?
Until today, we didn't think so.
Yeah, so I'm agnostic about that part. I don't know that we need to change the table for that, that we adopt. But, I'm fine with the motion just going forward to do the table. I would like to keep the methodology, because that's what we're already using. And the table reflects what the jurisdictions already use. And I think that's the more important point here. We're not adopting a new table that would change what we already did. We're adopting a new table that would affirm what we already did, and I would like to keep the methodology as well, because we're already 3/4 of the way through this process, many of us. So I think that would be most consistent, respectful of the expertise of the PTAC, and respectful of everybody's time and resources into this process so far.
And to confirm, the changes that are contemplated from the rural to the urban will change only the unincorporated and unincorporated UGA numbers for the county's allocation itself. It will not have any effect on any allocation number for any of the individual communities.
Okay.
So it won't change, it will make no changes to the work that the communities have done.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to adopt numbers that we can live by without changes in the future. So if we're gonna base our comp plan strictly on these numbers, then they have to be what they are.
Is there any further comment? We can take the vote.
Well, for the question.
All right. All in favor of approving the motion to hold a hearing on an updated table at the next steering committee, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
Any abstaining? Okay, that motion passes. I will triple down on my ask that the commissioners consider connecting with their legal to get a clarification on all of this. I'm very hesitant in all of this, knowing that the commissioners did take a formal vote to adopt something that included a table, and now we're talking about a change to that. And so I just want to make sure everything was on the up and up. So are there any other motions or considerations for this item? And we are at 10:58, so I apologize, it's taking quite a while, but good conversation. If not, Joel, do you have one thing to add? Okay, so why don't we then jump into the monitoring and reconciliation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All of you in your packet received a draft of what this would look like. It is a simple tool that takes the formal reconciliation process and reduces it to a process by which each of us agrees to monitor our real growth with our forecast growth and report those results essentially to this group, to the steering committee for evaluation. We set the process sets in place a formal report no later than 3 years into it. But all of us do annual reports for SRTC and others about our building permits. So this is something that the planners can do on an annual basis. This allows a chance to amend our allocations on a more frequent basis than either 5 or 10 years into the process. So I think our and PTAC's recommendation on this is to incorporate this into our process using the voluntary reporting, or the reporting will come from this group, and this will be incorporated in the countywide planning policy. So we'll come back to you for a public hearing, May, June, July, for your formal adoption. And so the idea is simply, this is our truth check. This is a way of monitoring how well these allocations are actually made.
So, I like the idea of, checkpoints to validate whether, a jurisdiction is, meeting its, growth projections. My challenge is, if you have a community that is not, what do we do? Are we going to take population from that community and adjust the urban growth boundary? Or are we going to take that population and say another community has to absorb that? So what is the outcome of the 5-year reconciliation?
The document, as it's currently construed, leaves that to the community to report that they're not meeting their allocation and bring it back through their local agreement with the county to then consider reallocation to other communities or at some point. There is no, in this draft, there is not an enforcement mechanism other than that reporting tool that is to say, here's what we were allocating, here's what we've seen in our permits, they don't align and we want to come back and talk about it. So it's a voluntary, but based on reporting.
But if a community is not meeting its growth projection and you assume that growth in that area should occur, and the adjacent community doesn't want the additional population because of the financial burden that it creates, what do we do? I mean, I love the idea that we're benchmarking and we're checking. Challenged by is what's the outcome? Or if we can take a corrective measure and actually, if it's not happening in the jurisdiction, great. But I want to make sure that all of us are aware that that's a possible outcome.
Yeah.
Or the alternative is, let's just hypothetically say, City of Spokane is not meeting its growth. Spokane Valley, you're going to have to pick up the load. And it creates a financial burden on you, and you're going, oh, heck no, I don't have the ability to do that. Then what? And so I just want to be thoughtful about, what is our expectation for not meeting the threshold?
It would, at least implicitly, it includes all possible options, including expansion into urban growth areas if the municipalities are unable to accommodate future growth. Everything that's in play that we're talking about today for allocation would be in play in the reallocation process.
So willingness would not be a factor, it would be whether or not you could just accommodate it. Because that's kind of how it is today, right?
Yes, I think that, well, the assignment is done willingly. Maybe that's a twist, but the assignment through, the tool and through PTAC is like, all right, here's our assignment. Can we handle it? If the answer is yes, we're done for that moment. What this tool is to say is, here's what we said we could do. Here's what the market is showing, and these two don't align. So how do we really?
So if I'm a community and I'm not meeting my threshold, I'm not going to volunteer to tell you I'm failing.
there's an element in all of this where, as the county has to exist as the regional government, this is a corollary to what has been there from the beginning, which is you make your own decisions, but you have to show us your work because the county is ultimately on the hook for these decisions. So yes, it's voluntary reporting, but it has to be documented and supported. No one can hide behind something that they can't support.
Well, I was just gonna ask about the willingness factor, because but I've, stood on the podium here a lot, talking about our constraints in Airway Heights. We have JLS, Fairchild Air Force Base, 700 acres in the middle of my town that's travel trust, 2 travel entities, an international airport, mining on the other side, just north of us, that is never going to be developed or not developed in the next 30 years. So if I can't meet my needs, but let's say, hypothetically, Liberty Lake can, what would stop us from swap? Just saying, hey, we can't meet those, but you can, if you want, they're there, they're available.
In this process, nothing would stop them. It would simply come back through the steering committee as that recommending body, just as you make those recommendations on allocations to the Board of County Commissioners now. Under the GMA, the county as the regional government makes the final decision on where the allocations go. But if it's a mutually agreed upon swap, then that would be up to you and the commissioners to agree to.
So it's an option.
Yes.
Okay.
Councilor Blitzky and then we'll. Sure.
I support this as is, but I really don't think we need to spend a lot of time agonizing over what we're gonna do in a year when we do discuss this. It'll be our first year. And I'd really like to caution against looking at 1 year and basing your whole assumptions about that. It's really easy to mischaracterize growth trends and the growth pipeline in another community. For example, what we heard in some of our testimony mentioning that we had 146 permits for residential housing in 25. We actually permitted 746 residential units and issued 1,011 certificates of occupancy, which is a difference in the pipeline. There's permits allocated and then there's actual certificates of occupancy. For the 146 residential permits was just the number of single family home permits used. We issued 254 single family certificates of occupancy though. And no, that was 2025.
But they were
And-
built in,
Yes, but it's like a caterpillar, like when you're in the army, you have a giant brigade run and we're all running. Different things happen and it clusters up in one place and then expands out in another place. And sometimes that's what our pipeline does for growth. So I'm just saying, like, I don't think we're gonna be taking huge actions the first year that we look at this, but it would be a really good time for us to talk about what are our menu of options and how do we want to deal with each other going forward. We have a lot on our plate right now. So I think this is adequate for now, but I don't think this is complete. And I think that is a good conversation for next year.
Or if there should just be a policy that we decide on as to how we would do this into the future that we could just work on over time. But Mr. Chris.
If I can piggyback on Councilor Bowman's scenario, say it just slight tweak, saying Airway Heights can't meet their growth predictions. Liberty Lake wants it, but Airway Heights says, no, you can't have my capacity. You can't have our allocation. Does that change that in any way? Because his scenario is both cities agree. Yes, we'd like to give it to you. Yes, we'd like to accept it. What if Airway Heights says, no, you can't have it? And Liberty Lake's like, well, we can absorb it and we want it. Does that change the situation in any way?
And can I piggyback on that? What are the repercussions?
Yeah.
For them?
Yeah. What happens?
Taking Councilmember Klitzky's perspective here, that may be far enough down in the weeds that I have no idea how to actually answer that today from our perspective on the county side of this. Except to say the idea of this is to, if there is a mismatch in the allocation, is to bring it up and say to all of us, here's a mismatch, how do we fix it? And if somebody raises their hand and say, we've got capacity, that could be an option. If nobody raises their capacity, then it's how do we change our growth area boundaries in some cases? Or do we do we go back to that community and say, have you thought in advance about changing your development regs yet again to accommodate this growth? I don't know what those specific answers would be, and I think that would be something we'd have to work out at the time. It's simply a tool to recognize way back to the beginning. HAP and this kind of planning with these kind of state mandates is nothing more than a crystal ball. And so where that takes us over the next couple of years, this is a tool where we could look back and go, let's check this every year, just to make sure we don't get too far out of sync before we're 5 years down the road.
Could a jurisdiction be in a situation where they're forced to change their development code beyond that which the state has mandated?
I don't think so.
Okay. So, sure.
Well, and I want to be real clear. I like the idea. I like the idea a lot, because the last 25 years, we've had aspirational goals that were never met or took 20 years to meet. And what should have happened back in 2005 didn't happen until almost 2025. So I love the tool of being able to hold all of us accountable to actually meet our goals as we establish them in this 20-year outlook. So just want to be real clear about that. I just want to try and get a better handle on what the consequences are.
If there are any very brief comments from the public, I would certainly welcome that. Very brief.
Could I
Yes.
just make a
Sure.
PTAC, we have, looked at these and then the next item, the ownership, countywide planning policies. PTAC would, as Commissioner French mentioned, that this one in particular has a lot of nuances. So we think in 2027 would be a better time to work through this. I do agree it's would be very worthwhile for this group, but right now we'd like to finish our comp plans and development regulations.
Yeah.
And have a clear understanding. And you did not bring up, besides the raw numbers, there could also be, we can't accommodate this income ban. Can you accommodate this income ban? So that there's also that to consider, and we don't know yet, and there's not a lot of experience in the state yet with that discussion. So I would just, I mean, I think it's good for you to have this discussion now, but I think actual action on the countywide planning policy should be deferred until at least 2027.
Anything, not, we're gonna move right into the home ownership. Okay, Commissioner.
So Scott, you have like a kind of a white paper about this idea, which I agree with Commissioner French. I think it's a good idea for all of us to, each jurisdiction to report back. And I think you have a 3-year in review and evaluation program that you're proposing is like by 3 years. And then at that 5-year mark, like there could be an opportunity to move things around. So I think it's a great idea. It needs more fleshing out, but I was, is the white paper kind of just an overview of what you were thinking? And then did you already add some of this into the planning policies or no?
No, at the moment that brief white paper stands alone, stands as an independent item for discussion here. Taking your direction, we will incorporate that into something that looks like CPP language and bring that back for consideration. That if this group wants to defer that to 27, that's fine. That's
I think we need to do it. We need to figure out like an interlocal of how we're gonna work together, what that looks like, how reallocation might occur. But that might be more than what we could accomplish, right now. But I just want to be on the record saying I think we need to do it.
I think there's too many potential issues that we need to flush out between now and then.
Anything else? No? Okay, while we move into the homeownership, Commissioner French, if you want to just tee it off, I know you're the chair of the subcommittee.
Yeah, so we did form a task force and had a cross section of folks participate with the task force. We had I think 3 meetings on the different approaches to try and achieve that. The goal is to say, if homeownership truly is a priority, then let's set it as a priority. And let's set it as a goal to start working to achieve. You know, we have levels of service in our countywide planning policies and in our town plans that talk about public safety and fire protection in parks and things like that. But we don't have a goal that says, what are we gonna do with regard to housing? And yet, my guess is every elected official sitting at this table has said to the community, we're gonna work to increase home ownership. We're gonna work to address the price of housing. And so, but it's lip service until we actually set a goal. And so that's what this tries to do. Originally, when the steering committee was talking about it, we suggested maybe it's a look back for 10 years, and I think it was like 70% of your housing total housing accommodation had to be available for home ownership. And then as we got into it, then it reduced down because some communities are different. And so we said, well, then take 10-year average of what you've done as a community and use that as a goal for the next 10 years or next 20 years. And I think that's where we ended up settling on as a threshold. So each community will adopt their own goal based upon what their performance has been for the last 10 years. And, you know, whether that home ownership is in the name, it's in the form of single family, duplexes, triplexes, or townhouses, condos. I mean, if the state finally gets its act together and has condo development regulations that make sense, you know, that's an option. But we need to provide, I believe, I think the majority of the folks in the task force believe that home ownership is a pathway to start generational wealth. And it also is a pathway to create safer, more livable neighborhoods. It's well documented that neighborhoods where home ownership is high are safer and require less police and public safety actions because the homeowners take care of the neighborhoods. And so that's the threshold, that's the goal. And I think it's ready to take to a public hearing and adopt something and actually say to the community that as electeds, we're committed to try and create pathways to allow people to own their own homes, to experience the dream of home ownership, security, and generational wealth building that'll make this community a stronger community. So that's the recommendation is, let's take it to a public hearing and see what we comes forward after that and adopt it as a policy for all of us to start to adhere to.
Commissioner, yeah, I've heard some folks express some hesitancy around it, but one of the arguments being that there's no way to track home ownership versus you know, the units that are not owner occupied. Is there a methodology at the county that you would pursue that you think you could track this at that side?
Census data is probably the one reliable tool through the ACS, the American Community Survey, that tracks ownership. So that would be something on probably a 5-year basis that you could look back on. But you know, in Joel's shop and others, the realtors certainly have their finger on the pulse of where that is. So I think with some cooperation from the private sector, we could have those data reliably on an annual basis.
So I think in the city, we actually have a tool to do it, and it's our rental registry. If you're not on there, then it's presumed you're owner occupied. And if you're not, then you're violating the law.
So thank you for providing the opportunity to provide clarity around that. A single family home is available for home ownership, whether it's being rented or whether it's being owned by the occupant. But it's available for ownership. then that's the goal. As opposed to, building these large apartment buildings and expecting everybody to be housed in apartment buildings as opposed to being able to experience the American dream of owning your own home. So we're not looking to try and say, we're gonna kick tenants out of a single family home because they're not the owner. It's just that the housing unit, that's the unit that could be available for home ownership.
So that's really the crux of this. It's not that you are actually having an owner occupied
Right.
home. It's just that you built what is a fee simple,
Yeah,
potentially owner occupied.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's what it is.
I think this exact discussion is why it's not ready to go for a hearing yet, because we haven't spelled that out in there. I think all the goals and all the methodology that we put in here are good. And I think that the edits that we've made are good, but I don't think we've had robust participation from jurisdictions about how they would actually do this. I think one of the reasons we haven't is because everybody's trying to work on the comp plan. And so I still think this needs work because, in my comments on an earlier draft, I was trying to point out that we don't have a methodology for home ownership. And I asked the question, are we talking about the rate of home ownership? Are we talking about the quantity of units? Are we talking about the percentage of people who own a home? Are we talking about the percentage of homes that are in owner occupancy? We still don't know. This conversation reveals that because I think as Commissioner French mentioned, like a single family home is available potentially for ownership from a land use and zoning perspective, but we don't always know whether it is. That if we're looking at a rental registry, I'm not clear if that really answers the question because we still aren't clear of whether we're looking at housing units or if we're looking at population. And then we'd have to consider the trends of how many people tend to live together and all of the other things, age brackets, income brackets, different things. So I think this needs more work. I think it's a worthy cause. I think it's an interesting discussion, but not only do I think it needs more work, I think this might be something we need to continue as a group to discuss because as Commissioner French also alluded to, some of the things to pull the lever that would make this a better scenario for people to be able to buy their first home is condo law reforms, all of those things that aren't this level. We need to work together and lobby the state, lobby the federal government, lobby the funding lenders to be more open to this conversation as well. This isn't something we can solve by ourselves, but together, if we're meeting and we're talking and we're creating a plan to get there, that's going to be much more effective than just adopting this document that isn't quite clear even what our goal is yet. We adopted a methodology for your 10-year trend, but we're still not super clear on how we're going to do that. So I think we need to keep working on this. And I think our group has done the best we can in the time we have, but I think we need more time.
Well, we've been talking about condo reform for 25 years, so I say, let's go.
So.
I'm gonna interrupt Mayor Cooper, just got her again, right?
Okay, I'm gonna go to Councilmember Bowman, then I'll go to Mayor Cooper.
Well, the community of Fairway Heights, through a process of many, many years of community outreach, I mean, we kind of drafted within the city of what the community wants us to look like, which is homeownership, destination point, there's many things that we kind of laid out that affects our community planning. I mean, we worked with community frameworks, Habitat for Humanity, Greenstone Homes for the Highland Village project for affordable housing out there in Fairway Heights. And I commend you for your work on that, and it's absolutely incredible what we've been able to do. But, I think community outreach is the thing that pops in my mind most is what does the community want? And we've done that research in the city. I mean, and I asked you guys, what is, the rest of the municipalities done and the county done to actually see what the people want?
Mayor Cooper?
Thank you so much. I do support the idea of putting the home ownership in there. Everything else that's in there is supposed to be a pathway toward home ownership. It's upward mobility. It's stability for people that once they have a home, they actually own and they'd never have to move again, unless they're continuing on in their upward mobility. But to not put it in there doesn't make any sense because, and I think it's just a simple statement that the ultimate goal is that there is a pathway forward for people to own homes. That is the desire for all of us, that people would own homes, and the townhomes and condos and, cottage communities and all of that are just pathways to where, and even having a rental still creates some stability. People live in a home for a year or two or whatever that lease is. That's just it's part of the pathway. So I don't think we need to have a big, extensive discussion about, is home ownership important and should it be our stated goal? It should be a stated goal. I don't think it adds to anything, and I think people will resent the idea that we're going to, you have to report or track or whatever. We'll get that through census data. We can work through homeowners and those who are working closely, even with social services, as to who's housed and where are they housed. But I totally support the idea of adding the home ownership into the language. Just simple statement that, because it makes sense. All of these other things are stair steps to get there. So I would look forward to getting this stated, and I don't think it puts any big onus on us. You can't make people own a house, right? We have to just create opportunity, and I think cities are going to want to do that. So.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm for homeownership as well. I know our city's trying to figure out how to do homeownership as our goals for our comprehensive plan, but it might look different. And so while there's some conversation of, well, we can get that data through rent registry, I don't think that the county or the rest of the city should force our city to have to do a rent registry, because we don't do that yet. Through this draft, it also says that only jurisdictions above a population of 50,000 are going to be mandated to do a homeownership percentage goal. So that's us in Spokane and maybe the unincorporated county. So I don't think that this is ready for this year. I think we need to get through a comprehensive plan process this year and come back with something that's better, that could work for everybody, and allow the individual jurisdictions to do this year.
Councilmember Kliski, and then we'll go to Commissioner Frank.
Scott, can you refresh my memory? We're modifying additional, we're adding additional language, but we already have language about home ownership in the countywide planning policies. Is that correct? Or have we edited it so many times? Okay. Okay, so I don't know if we could adopt just the language that we're affirming it as a goal for the meantime being, but I don't think that this larger proposal is ready to move forward yet. And I do think we have to have a discussion, because we have to talk to each other if we're gonna work together on this anyway.
But I would look for a motion to do whatever it is the body wants to do, Commissioner Frank.
Yeah, the recommendation is to take it to a public hearing. And, this is a recommendation, and they evolved out of the task force, and, don't let perfection be the stop of the good, or the obstacle of the good. There are a lot of elements in our countywide planning policies that are aspirational. And this, I think, is an aspirational issue, and why you would not be in favor of having a target, a goal for home ownership is challenging, and I would love to hear it on your next campaign. This is about taking it to a hearing and getting public input. So, when we have modified policies and the countywide planning policies to perfect them over the last 25, 30 years that they've been in existence. So we put this in place. It's a starting point, but if you don't start, you'll never finish. And so let's get started. Let's set aspirational goals. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see this exodus out to Cooney County, and we just can't afford it. I mean, we've started the budget process for the county, and 27 is ugly, and it just gets uglier from there if we don't start turning this around. We have gotten people in Idaho come to Spokane County to work because they can get a good job, and then they take that money to Kootenai County to get a good home. We gotta fix that, folks. We gotta keep that money here in the county and give everybody the opportunity to have a home that they can call their own here in Spokane and not in Kootenai County. So the recommendation is to take it to a hearing, and you're looking for a motion. I move that we put on the May agenda a public hearing about creating a homeownership policy for the countywide planning policies.
Second.
And just for clarification on that, it's also allowing each jurisdiction to create their own.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Is there a second to the motion?
I will second the motion, and I'd like to speak to it if I could. I was a part of the subcommittee that I think we had three meetings. To discuss this. I mean, we had good conversations on it. We had members of the public. We had folks on there that really share it. In those meetings, there's no disagreement from anyone that I can remember about the need for homeownership or the goal to encourage the homeownership. And we know, like Commissioner French said, if it's not going to, us having that policy is not going to magically put people in the position of homeownership, but it is a goal. There were concepts thrown out that the 10-year look back, what has been your homeownership over 10 years, that can be your goal as moving forward. We had a good robust discussion on that. Again, this is just for a hearing. Maybe the vote fails, maybe it passes, but let's have a hearing. But I will point out, we had a majority vote today to bring forward a table that uses a formula that we know we will have to manually change the numbers on that table for those numbers to balance, and it passed. So let's just have a hearing and see what the community thinks about it.
And a hearing gives us the ability to defer a decision, to remand it back to the task force, pass it.
Or amend,
yeah.
Bring your language.
Mayor,
Next meeting.
Mayor Cooper.
Yeah, I guess I'm just not sure that just adopting a number is going to create such interest in the community that they're suddenly going to stop moving to Idaho and build in Washington. So that's a bit of a stretch for me. And I don't know that adopting another number is really changing anything for me either. We'll already have this model. We can amend that. We can justify it. And now we're going to add another layer. I heard, we already have homeownership as a priority in the CCP. So
No,
I'm just not sure.
It's not.
No, it's
What's
not.
that?
It's not in there, Mayor.
Oh, okay.
There's
I
nothing
thought
about home-
council member.
I was wrong.
Yeah.
She was wrong.
Oh, okay. I was like, I didn't know that, and so that's why I'm supportive of adding some language. I don't know. I think I'd like a little more understanding of what it is that each city would have to adopt. If we pass this, and then do we have now another methodology and another number, and then you have these targets, and what happens if you don't meet the target number, and then what, you can't do all the other things that are pathways to home ownership. So I guess I'm not really comfortable with adopting it as is, but I fully support the home ownership and getting it stated, but creating a complex system or methodology and then having to adopt a number, I'm not really crazy about that.
So we have a policy on housing affordability and we're not meeting that goal right now. So is anybody here feel like they're getting pressured by the county on that? That's literally in the countywide planning policy today. I don't think this is a big controversial discussion. It's just about home ownership as a goal. We have a lot of goals that nobody's hitting, and these are aspirational goals, a lot of them. So I don't know why this is such a hot issue to debate. I mean, I guess it'll take a little bit of time. I think we're missing a lot of goals that we said we want to hit. So I guess that's my question right now.
It's just a quick comment, and I agree with the comments by Councilmember Wick on the number, and Mayor Cooper alluded to that also. I would reluctantly support this with the idea that we don't put any arbitrary numbers at this point on any municipalities, regardless of population. We can always adjust that later, so why I'm hearing, because other understanding is on that. So I have no problem supporting that, it's just a general statement. We can always adjust those. We're adjusting things as we are at every meeting. I'm not being It's easiest by saying, you do the whole thing.
And that's what I'm hearing from Mayor Cooper, is just backing ourselves in the corner again. Or, having another mandate. So I would support it, if the language is there for them. Everybody at the table, I'm sure would agree with Commissioner French on that. So as far as the home ownership is concerned, but yeah, I agree with Mayor Cooper, just don't want to back ourselves in the corner.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think it was about feelings or about how we feel about home ownership. I think it's about strategy. And to me, I want some bang for the buck. I want us to come up with a strategy that will actually move the needle, not just adopt a goal and then say, all right, we adopted a goal and we're done. So I don't want to give up on homeownership, but I think we need more of a clear commitment. And I don't know, we have heard from staff that we don't currently track ownership, so it could be a little bit of an unfunded mandate, but also zoning, which is mostly what this GMA stuff is about, is agnostic about ownership. So like this is not necessarily the tool that was designed to deal with the home ownership concept. But this is the place where we kind of talk about these things amongst governments. So I feel like this is the right place to have the discussion, even if this isn't the right tool. So that's why I'm open to this conversation, but I think this does need either more work or to just be a simple goal without sort of this, a little bit of a mandate.
I like that, a couple different strategies. Hey, that's one thing that, I speak on Airway Heights. We pride ourselves on the Highland Village project because it is affordable home ownership for lower income families. And, so I think having some of those options available, not mandated, but available in there and working within the communities that are already providing these, we could come up with some great tools together, that could provide these opportunities. So I think seeing a couple of options would be where we would like to go.
Commissioner.
Yeah, and the policy is aspirational. And we don't say you've got to do it this way, and that's for every jurisdiction to figure out how you're going to accomplish it. But if you don't have a goal, you don't have a target, how are you going to get there? A roadmap to nowhere. And so, that's every community will develop their own tools, their own strategies, but overall, we want to be able to say homeownership is a priority for this community, and we have an aspirational goal. Each community can set their own threshold as far as what that goal is based upon your own history. So we're not mandating anybody to do anything other than to say, aspirationally, we prioritize homeownership. We want to be able to make sure that people have an opportunity to own a home and stuff. So, and the tools and how we monitor it, all that kind of stuff, we can develop that. I mean, there's enough resources to be able to identify how that would happen. But again, you can throw all the reasons in the world for why you're not going to do something. Again, next time you run, I'll remind you of it. Thank you.
Councilor Wick, and then if we're ready, we can go to take a vote on the motion.
I was just kind of wondering, so in here where it talks about setting a home ownership percentage goal, it's limiting it to just jurisdictions above 50,000. So I wasn't sure what the committee was thinking there or why. I mean, if we're all in agreement that we're going to set home ownership percentage goals, why does this policy set it to only those over 50,000 have to do it?
I can speak to that. Just because the three jurisdictions, the three biggest jurisdictions, have the greatest number of resources available to be able to accomplish that, where some of the smaller cities don't have access to those kind of resources. And so that's the reason for it. But if you want to make it countywide, go ahead. But I think Rockford and Latah and some of the other communities are going to be really challenged in trying to hit that metric. So that's why we did it.
Something we can talk about if indeed we have a hearing or another workshop on this. So with that, unless there's anything else, why don't we take a motion? The motion is to hold a hearing on this at our May steering committee meeting. It's not to adopt or anything else, just to hold a hearing. So, all those in favor of putting this on the agenda as a hearing? Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I didn't take any public comment.
There's going to be no public comment.
I'm sorry. You're right. You're right. Let me very quickly, let's do, some quick comment. If we can be as expeditious as possible, that'd be great. It's 11:40. I apologize. I'm trying to speed along. Yes.
Jim Frank again. I was on the steering committee for this, and I'll tell you why this is, I'll tell you why this is very important. And there's a narrative that's developed to some degree at Commerce, so it's changing. But it's very prevalent in PTAC. And that is that the only way to meet the affordable housing needs of middle and low income families is to build apartments. And if you want to see that language, and again, I'm not trying to criticize different organizations here, but I'm basing this just on the experience that we've had over the last few years with Habitat and other people that we're trying to provide affordable housing for. If you read the new introduction to the City of Spokane Comprehensive Plan, they spend 2 pages talking about how important it's going to be in our plan development to provide for more apartments, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to meet requirements of HB 1220. And even in Airway Heights, for example, where we've done some work, it took us 3 years to get that project approved, and we're trying to do another phase. And we're fighting this narrative that you have to build apartments to meet that need. And so this language about homeownership and this language about middle housing is really important because it's trying to break that narrative. And the narrative is really wrong at almost every level. It's wrong from a cost standpoint, because we can build middle housing for half the price that they're building apartments. It's wrong from a livability narrative, because you're forcing middle and low income families into these massive apartment projects that can never possibly integrate into the neighborhood. I want you to take 10 minutes after this meeting ends and go across the street here, go across the street. You can see it from the parking lot. There's a brand new Spokane Housing Authority 500-unit apartment project for families. They're 4-story walk-up apartments. There's not 1 inch of lawn area in that project that isn't a storm drainage pond. It's an awful project to be putting families in. But that's the narrative. That's what everybody is saying we have to do. And you compare that then, and all of you, please go to see the Airway Heights project and how you can integrate families into neighborhoods. When you put low-income families in these apartment projects, you're preventing them from ever escaping poverty. You're dooming them to a situation that continues the poverty in their family. If you allow them through middle housing options to enter neighborhoods, you give those family hope. That narrative about apartments has to change. And what this language does is this is aspirational language. These aren't rules, these are not zoning regulations, these are not rules. But there has to be somewhere an understanding that you have to break this narrative. Commerce is starting to break the narrative. They're starting to understand that there are other ways of providing housing for families at a lot less public finance, because you have to look at where this money's coming from. And to meet the needs of these low-income families requires subsidy. And you need to be able to minimize that subsidy if you're really going to meet these families' needs. Anyway, this is really important. I think that language is very important. And I think you have to understand the challenges that all of us are facing to try to do middle housing. It is a huge challenge. And Scott, part of the reason that it's not happening is because your development regulations don't allow it. Even today, they don't allow it. We're trying to do a project in the city of Spokane, and we're forced to go through a long, complicated PUD process. And all we want to do is build small houses on small lots that use private driveways. But you can't use a private driveway in the city of Spokane unless you go through a PUD. I can't, in the city of Airway Heights, I want to do 3,000 square foot lots. I can't do it because their minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet. And if I want to do a small home, I have to go through a complicated unit lot subdivision process. It forces me into a homeowners association. These rules are terrible. You make it so hard to build affordable housing that nobody does it. And there has to be some language, some aspirational language that there's a different pathway than building apartments. Thank you.
Anything else, Jared, really quick?
Yeah, just briefly, I want to talk about a market perspective. There is a hunger for home ownership that I don't know that you recognize. Because we have moved the market, the pricing is here, and what people can afford are here. But there is a circle in that is so hungry for home ownership. I cannot emphasize that enough. The Airway Heights project you're talking about, do you know how long the wait list is for people who didn't get those homes? Would you think a lot would be 200, 400? Ask Habitat, it crashed their server at 4,000. 4,000. One of the county commissioners, I don't want to point them out, had his grandmother's home go on the market for under 300, had a waiting list line around the block on the day that it was being shown. There is a hunger. Your people are asking for this. And the Spokane Housing Coalition, you presented documents about 3 months ago. Take a look at those recommendations. They all point at a single thing. How can we make a home that people want and need? Thank you.
I will say something about the Highland Village project. I was actually just humanist side. The one thing I love about it, kids are playing in the streets. They're playing in their yards. They're playing in the community. They're not stuck inside. We literally, the other day, we were talking about it. There was 40 kids out in the neighborhood playing, laughing, joking, just being with one another. Yeah, so believe me, we understand the importance of especially that project and the additional phases. How can we do this? With the and still have responsible growth? You know, and yes, the project took forever to get through. That was one of the first in the state of its kind. You know, as far as we're aware, correct?
But you're making the second phase just as hard.
Well, come to city council meetings every Monday at 5:30. Let's have the talk. I know it.
Well, why don't we?
Yeah.
We'll bring it offline.
Yeah.
But, interesting discussion. Okay, anything else? Not seeing anything here, not seeing any? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to hold a hearing on this item, at our May steering committee meeting, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Any abstaining? Okay, that motion carries. And unless there's anything else on this topic, we are at the conclusion of our meeting. Is there anything for the good of the order? Seeing none, then we will adjourn at 11:47. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
All those and stuff.